Supercars are back for the final super sprint round of the year. That's right, we're not far away from the endurance events at Sandown and Bathurst, but before we get to those, the teams are in South Australia for the first of two times this year and at one of Australia's newest motorsport facilities, the Bend Motorsport Park. The track is located about 100 kilometres southeast of Adelaide, and it's a road course about 4.9 kilometres in length, or 3 miles if you prefer, in a clockwise direction with 18 turns, and despite its high average speed, you'd be unlucky to hit anything around here, so I put the risk rating as low. As for my thoughts on the Bend, I must admit when it was first introduced, I wasn't the biggest fan of it. It's clearly a very well run facility, but the track just didn't feel like it had much of a soul to it. But as the years have gone on, the organisers have really put in a lot of effort to give it a really unique feel and identity, and it's gradually been growing on me, and this year appears no different. I'm actually quite looking forward to the racing round here this weekend. So what will a lap look like in one of the new GEN3 Supercars? Well, it kicks off with a very long and wide run into the first corner. Turn 1 is a 90-degree right-hander that directly feeds into turn 2 and 3, seeing battles continue. Turn 4 is a bit of a nothing corner, but you certainly notice turn 5. That puts you down a short shoot into turn 6. 7, once again, largely ignored, but then you have a really fun sequence in 8, 9, and 10. Turn 11 and 12, bit of a technical area, but you can see overtakes down at turn 12. 13 is a uphill right-hander before you get into the sequence of 14, 15, and 16. You often see fakes into here, but rarely an actual move before a couple of right-handers in 17 and 18 finish up the lap. One of the reasons why I struggle to love the Bend is because it can be very hard to work out what part of the track you're looking at. The place is built in a big wide open field and there's not a lot of landmarks around for you to get your bearings. If you are watching Supercars around here for the first time though, I've got 3 main spots for you to look out for. The first one is down at turn 1. I've mentioned there's a big long run into this first corner and it's very wide on approach. We can see cars 4 and sometimes even 5 wide going into here, and of course that often results in chaos when you do get to the apex. After lap 1 it is one of the biggest overtaking locations as well, so definitely a spot to watch. The next location is turn 5, a very high speed left-hander, and on the first lap the cars really lean on each other in their packs through here, and if you have a wheel interlock or someone check up on the brakes, it can result in absolute pandemonium. So definitely keep an eye on this section of the track on the opening lap. And my final spot to watch is something to watch not just during the races, but the whole weekend. The sequence from 8 to 10 is really cool. It's a downhill multi-apex right-hander. It's kind of Turkey-esque, if you know that famous corner from that Formula 1 track, and we see problems down here in just about every session. The drivers really push the limits through here. There's a lot of runoffs, so they can get away with it, and sometimes we see some bold overtake attempts in the races as well. Super exciting. I may not be the biggest fan of the Bend, but I would pay good money to get in a car and go through that sequence. Last time we were here, we actually had some really exciting racing. The first race was headlined with a wildcard entry, Zach Best on pole position, and that race got underway with a really good 3-way battle for the lead early on. Race 2, someone must have walked under a ladder before this one because it was just drama throughout. Thomas Randall was on the front row but stalled on the grid, ultimately rear-ended in a big way by Andre Heimgartner, bringing out the red flag. Later on, when the race got restarted, we saw Lee Holdsworth and Scott Pye come together in the pits. Brody Kostecki also had a bad stop, almost dragging one of his mechanics down the pit lane, and the drama continued into race 3, this time because of rain. It was chucking it down, and we saw an awesome battle for the win between Anton De Pasquale, Cameron Waters, Shane Van Gisbergen, and his teammate Brock Feeney. Elsewhere down the grid, Davey Reynolds ran into the back of James Golding, and Brad Jones Racing gave us a blast from the past, getting out a squeegee, this time justifying that it wasn't loose in the cabin thanks to Velcro, but we shouldn't see those antics with the new heated windshields in Gen 3. Despite all the chaos on track, the person on top of the step was the same in all 3 races. It was a clean sweep for Shane van Gisbergen, but he certainly had the work for it. So how are things looking in 2023? Well, it's another one of those weird weekends where we don't actually see supercars on the Friday. That is reserved purely for the support categories, and they're expected to encounter some rain throughout the day. Moving through to Saturday, the weather should be a little bit better, partly cloudy, but no rain expected at the time of recording. Supercars will be on track in the morning for practice 1 and practice 2. Qualifying, which will be the 3-part format, will be in the afternoon, and that will set the grid for the first race of the weekend, 20 laps in length, set to go underway at 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. On Sunday, we'll have the qualifying sessions for race 2 and 3, and those races themselves will take place at 1:20 and 4:20 p.m, once again Australian Eastern Standard Time. Alright, let's have a talk about the key Supercars headlines, starting off with Sydney and the aftermath from that event. Be sure to check out my round review if you want my thoughts on how it all unfolded. But Barry Ryan, the Erebus team principal, has apologised for his post-race rant that saw him swear on live TV. Jake Kostecki has confirmed that he will be returning to Supercars in a Bathurst wildcard run by Blanchard Racing Team. He'll be partnered with Aaron Love. Ford have pulled their backing of the safety car and medical car sponsorship going into the Bend this weekend. I don't imagine they're swapping those vehicles out for something else. I think we'll just see less Ford sponsorship on them. And then, of course, the big news. Will Brown is rumoured, if not albeit confirmed at this stage, to be replacing Shane van Gisbergen at Red Bull, freeing him to go to NASCAR or America at the very least. A big thank you to everyone for your support on my video covering this news earlier this week, and since I released that, it sounds like Jack LeBrock is being lined up as the Erebus favourite to replace Will Brown, although I'm recording this on the Monday and that story continues to evolve. Finally, on the topic of NASCAR, we had 2 supercar starters at Indianapolis. Brody Kostecki started at the back after a crash in qualifying, finishing 22nd, and Shane van Gisbergen started 8th, I believe from memory, and wound up in 10th. As for Gen3 Watch, these new generation supercars continue to evolve, and the pain point right now really sounds like it's still on durability, particularly those steering racks between Sydney Motorsport Park and this weekend. Tim Edwards, the team principal of Tickford Racing, has called them not fit for purpose. And when you're spending a rumoured $10,000 a pot on each of those pieces of equipment, you can understand his frustration. As for other notes, I'm curious to see how Brody Kostecki and Shane van Gisbergen reacclimatise. Obviously, both very adaptable drivers, but they're having a hell of a trip back to Australia and South Australia specifically from America in just a few days. Shane van Gisbergen, however, is going to remain in the spare chassis that he ran at the last event, as his original Gen 3 chassis continues to have a weird steering problem under brakes. And if you're headed to the Bend Motorsport Park this weekend, be sure to check out the drag strip, which is just about complete, and while I don't know the details, it sounds like there's a way you actually get to go down the strip at cruising speed, mind you, and check it out for yourself. It's really cool to see another top level drag strip opening up in Australia, and it looks like they're doing a great job with that facility. Okay, let's get into some predictions now. As always, these are just a bit of fun, don't take them too seriously, and I know I say that every single week, but there's always someone that gets triggered every single week, so I'll keep saying it. But my first prediction is that we will see at least 2 Mustang victories this weekend, and I can't give you any reasoning or logic behind this one based on the season form so far. I've just got a gut feeling Ford will take the majority of the wins this weekend. My second prediction, I think Ford fans will also enjoy. I'm predicting civil war at either Erebus or Red Bull between their drivers. Now, there is logic behind this one. Both teams have both their drivers in contention for the championship, and we're getting to the pointy end of things now, and both of those teams have drivers moving elsewhere in 2024, and I suspect with that knowledge there's going to be a bit more games played, a bit more aggression potentially, and maybe even some politics into the fray. And my last prediction, I definitely don't want to happen, but again, just a gut feeling, we might see another start line incident this weekend. I really hope not, because we saw a huge one with Andre Heimgartner and Randall last year. But yeah, we've got a big long run into that first corner, and hopefully no one chokes and stalls on the start. As usual, I like to include a few predictions from you guys. And the first one here from Mads saying Cameron Waters to win a race. Your braver than I am because I've predicted that a few times and it hasn't happened. Mostert to get 10 plus positions gained in a single race based on his sort of quali versus race pace. I think that one's actually quite likely. And Shane van Gisbergen to lead the championship at some point during the weekend. Now, that's a really interesting one because it made me think, has Shane actually led the Drivers' Championship at any point this year? Obviously, he won in Newcastle, but was ultimately disqualified from that one. And if he has led at any other point, it would have only been for a short period of time. So I think at this stage of the season, if he does go to the front, that could be quite an ominous warning shot to his rivals. The next prediction is from Max Jones saying Penrite finally have a good weekend. And boy, do they need one. This team, going into Gen 3, I thought would be dark horses for the championship actually, but they've really struggled with Gen 3 so far. And we know Davey Reynolds, when the environment's right, he can do really good. And I think Matt Payne has also shown flashes of real strong pace throughout the season as well. But something just isn't quite clicking for that team at the moment. And it sounds like they may be looking for a new driver if Davey Reynolds moves on at the end of the year. So they definitely want to show some form, some pace, and hopefully encourage another top tier driver to that team. We'll see if they turn it around this weekend. And finally, Carl Hawking says, sorry, but I'm going to say a boring weekend with a lot of tyre management. And I would agree actually that tyres are going to be a big talking point this weekend. The Bend is quite similar to the last event in Sydney with lots of long corners that really punish the tyres. But tyre races are interesting. They can sort of go one of two ways. You can either have everyone really conscious about it, parading around to a number, not really racing each other, which is obviously not that exciting for the fans. Or you can sort of get to the end of races and there's big pace discrepancies between the cars, leading to some good action late in the day. So fingers crossed it's the latter that we get around the Bend, and fingers crossed we get to talk about an exciting race on the other side of the round. Alright, let's refamiliarize ourselves with the championship picture. Brodie Kostecki continues to lead the way from his soon-to-be departing teammate in Will Brown. He's 41 points behind the lead. Shane van Gisbergen is not far away either. They're in third place, and his own teammate Brock Feeney in fourth. Bit of a bigger gap to those behind, but they're not quite out of the championship hunt just yet, but they certainly need some strong performances and some luck to go their way if there to be a factor. Chaz Mostert in fifth, Andre Heimgartner in sixth, Cam Waters in seventh, and Jack LeBrock continuing a strong season in eighth. And on the team side of things, it's a similar story with Erebus leading the way over Red Bull Ampol Racing. A much bigger gap back to third place though, with Brad Jones Racing, Tickford in fourth, Team 18 in fifth, WAU in sixth, and Shell VPAR Racing down there in seventh. And that's actually just reminded me that the Bend has actually recently picked up some sponsorship from Shell for that track, so I'm sure that team will be really motivated to get a strong result. And finally, it's not just about the supercars. We have a fairly good variety of support categories with Touring Car Masters, S5000, Holtec V8 Super Ute Series, my guilty pleasure those things, Toyota Gazoo 86s, and Porsche Carrera Cup Australia. But that will just about bring this video to an end. Now, the supercars news has been pretty thick and fast while I've recorded this video over the course of a couple of days, so I'll be sure to link some newer stories that have broke since recording the audio for this one. And while you're down there, be sure to let me know your thoughts and any final predictions before we go racing. We'd love to hear what you think. Of course, be sure to treat people like your trackside while you're down there, and if you're not subscribed, be sure to do so. I'd love to see you back here for my round review on the other side of the Bend.